Okay, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started now. Hopefully you can hear me. So if everyone can take a seat and put your devices away, stop your conversation, that would be lovely. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you now Dr. Stephanie Gillespie. She is the 2022 EPICS in IEEE Committee Chair. She's also an Associate Dean at the Tagliatella College of Engineering at the University of New Haven. And since entering academia, she has been passionate about preparing the next generation of engineers with real-life skills, especially by teaching courses in the area of engineering service learning, first-year engineering courses, and the grand challenges of engineering. Her current research interests span multiple areas of engineering education, including makerspaces, which we heard a lot about yesterday, multidisciplinary teams, gender diversity and minority retention, and entrepreneurial mindset. So today she will be telling us about EPICS in IEEE, and I give you Dr. Gillespie.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. I will be honest that we were late arrivals to this conference, so I did not get to hear about the makerspace conversation yesterday, and I'll have to follow up with those individuals. The reason I was not here yesterday is we were actually in Phoenix, Arizona, filming some of our student-funded teams because they are trying to make a real impact in their local community. And I'm a little concerned about the styrofoam boat that I saw, but I know they've got a next version prototype coming soon that will eventually be able to navigate lakes, rivers, the sewage retention areas, and collect all the trash that collects in those areas. And maybe the team that wasn't doing that, but is specifically working on adding oxygenation to the fisheries for increased production of fish and reduced waste of natural resources, will also be successful. But even if they aren't successful in implementing their projects, they will have an amazing experience that they are learning throughout, ready to take those new skills into industry, thinking about things from just a non-academic perspective. So today I'm here to talk to you about EPICS and IEEE. We'll have the opportunity for you to learn a little bit about what our committee does, what we do, the funding opportunities we have, and the opportunities for you to engage, even if you're not actually interested in these projects directly. But I like to connect with you first by thinking about your own passions. So we're at a humanitarian technology conference, and I like to think you're all here for a reason. So if you can improve any 3 things in the world, what would they be? Maybe it's something you got inspired by hearing today. Maybe it's something that you've been thinking about for a while or you're already working on. I'm just going to let you reflect on this for about 30 seconds or so. What is important to you that would make the world a better place? How many of you thought of something global, a big issue that impacts multiple communities around the world? How many of you thought about something regional that might be impacted by the local climate or might be impacted by politics that are happening in a more regional state? Any regional problems? I see a couple hands up. What about local problems? What about something that's impacting your neighbor, your friend, someone you see on the corner every day? So when we think about service learning, I like to emphasize that those problems don't have to be really lofty things that are far away. They might be something that can start local and expand to a regional scope, and maybe even eventually turn into a solution that could be implemented across the globe. But your students, or some of you in this room, have the skills to take a tiny dent out of that problem. Most of us are probably not going to completely solve the entire problem, but how can we involve our students in an awareness of these problems so that they are inspired to take those amazing technical and innovation skills they're developing and use them for good? We call this service learning. So service learning has a few different formal definitions depending upon who you ask. But ultimately, we sort of summarize it as a combination of a little bit of community service and a little bit of a learning experience that has a partnership between the students and the community. Ultimately, it allows students to have a meaningful experience interacting with the community, learning with and from the community, and ideally benefiting the community as well. Now, service learning is not purely community service. I think tutoring is important, right? We could all use a little bit of math tutoring along the way or literacy tutoring along the way, but something that is purely community service for the good of the community is not necessarily service learning. Similarly, community inspired learning, where we send our students out to go get real world data from the community. We ask them to survey the community, but we never bring anything meaningful back to the community, is not service learning either. It's an important partnership, and the community might still feel it's valuable for them, but it's not necessarily having a direct benefit on the community. And then many of us in this room are probably familiar with a traditional engineering or computer science design process. And a lot of times in the classroom, the goal is to gain technical skills. It's an opportunity to maybe understand stakeholders and clients if you're going a little bit beyond just the technology. But we don't always think about it from the user perspective in the community. And more often than not, the community is not consulted with this. Maybe we give it to them and say, hey, I hope this solves your problem. But more often than not, that creates the engineers of the world's saviors complex. And I don't want to encourage that. I think we should be working in partnership with communities for service learning. So my goals for you for this session today are hopefully something I think all of you will walk away with some value. I want you to be inspired to facilitate change in your local community, and you can change that to global or regional. Pick the term that resonates with you. I want you to know about EPICS and IEEE and our funding source opportunities and what we're looking for in our proposals. Because even if you aren't interested in writing a proposal, you can share that information with those in your network. And by having more groups submitting strong proposals, we can have broader global impact on service learning and engineering students. And again, if you're not interested in writing proposals, because maybe some of you do that too much in your day jobs already, I understand, but we still have a few ways for you to get involved with EPICS and IEEE. So what is EPICS and IEEE? We are an organizational unit under the Educational Activities Board, and we support programs and activities that advance technology and benefit humanity. Ultimately, this comes down to, we have 4 main theme areas that we like to work in: education, access and abilities, the environment, and human services. So if you, as a group of students, your student team, if you as a faculty member, or if you're in industry and you feel passionately about any of these 4 areas, we have an opportunity to connect and engage after today's presentation. We believe that service learning is one way to impact positively those 4 areas, where students and IEEE and the communities partner together so that students get a positive and richer learning experience. Communities have the ability of people being aware of their problems and hopefully working together to collaborate and create solutions. And IEEE has the opportunity to expose new young members to IEEE and gain membership, and find opportunities for young professionals and life members to see value and give back in our communities as well. We've supported over 160 projects in the last 10 years around the world, and we've impacted over 10,000 students through this initiative. We do believe that service learning is one approach to changing the world, and we encourage all of you to get involved with us today. Let's talk about those 4 areas and what that means, because they're really broad. So from the environment perspective, I'm highlighting 2 projects here. The first one on the left is out of New Hampshire. And this is one of our teams that was concerned about water quality. Specifically, we know that oysters clean rivers and they clean the oceans, but the oyster population was dying. So they created sensors to try to understand what was happening in the water quality that was so bad that it was killing even the oysters. On the right side, you see pictures of a high school in Baltimore learning about energy efficiency and designing off-grid solutions for when the grid goes down, such as after hurricanes or disasters. Our next area is education and outreach. So this is something that I believe is at the heart of what IEEE believes in, and I hope many of you have participated in some of these activities. But we have K through 12 outreach, including STEM discovery, STEM identity, hands-on curriculums and projects. So on the left, you see a group of IEEE students leading outreach activities for local high schools. And on the right, they took it beyond just outreach. They had the opportunity to design an alternative robotics curriculum that emphasized circuits and electronics. So it's not the traditional FIRST robotics curriculum or other similar branded curriculums. This was something that was a little bit more low cost and accessible and had a little bit more emphasis on the circuits part of this. So these are types of education and outreach projects that we funded. Access and abilities is another important pillar of what we look for. And for many of those who might be hard of hearing, sign language is a valuable communication tool. But if I don't speak sign language, you can talk to me and I can't understand you. We've created an additional communication barrier. So we had a group of students around the world who are working on turning sign language into spoken language. So for someone who signs, it would be converted to spoken language and I could respond back to you. We also have access and abilities from more of a just educational component, where there's a big project out there called Go Baby Go. Is anyone familiar with Go Baby Go? I see one hand, love it. Go Baby Go was an opportunity for individual young toddlers to have these little fun recreational toys that you're typically driving. And those create important hands-on hand-eye coordination skills, motor skills. For toddlers with disabilities, though, they may not be able to use these in the successful full manner. So Go Baby Go takes these vehicles and identifies toddlers with learning disabilities or physical disabilities and modifies them in a way so that they can still have this fun activity, this fun toy that is also helping with their motor development. The last area we fund is really broad and we call it human services. I like to categorize it as anything else that makes the world a better place, specifically for humans. So the project on the left is a group of students in Uganda who are installing lightning arresters on the top so that their buildings are safer with some of the storms that they have in their areas. And on the right, we had a team that focused on digital literacy. Now, this project is a little bit dated, but there are still some communities that don't have easy access to technology and where the students and schools are not trained in using technology. So the Digital Literacy Project built a training computer lab in country for students and community members to learn how to access the internet and learn how to use those resources that the internet provides in a safe manner. So these are a couple examples of different projects that have been funded around the globe in EPICS and IEEE. Now, I like to think about this as, great, now you know what we do, but how do you get directly involved? And I want to emphasize that service learning, while we do provide money for it, is something that doesn't have to have money from EPICS and IEEE. Any single one of you that's involved in a classroom or is connected to a classroom can initiate service learning in your community. It can be inside of an extracurricular activity. It could be with your IEEE section, the student branches, the HKN chapters, your engagement with a club that you mentor at a local high school. All of this can use service learning as a platform. And it all starts with identifying a problem. You can do this yourself as a mentor or a facilitator and try to find an organization that's directly connected to the community who knows what some of the problems are in the community. Or maybe you've already done that. And that's what you were thinking when you raised your hand earlier about that local, regional, or global impact. But having that community connection gives the students a little bit more context. It's no longer a case study. It's no longer an example problem. This is something where the students can engage in a meaningful way. Then we want to encourage you and the students you're thinking about working with to develop a relationship with this organization and the contacts who will represent that organization. Who are going to be the individuals who are going to implement the solution? Who will take care of the solution from a maintenance standpoint? Meet them, talk to them, understand what their constraints are. Because if we design a solution that doesn't work for an organization, it will be abandoned. And we don't want to spend resources and time creating something that just gets abandoned. And then the last and possibly most important part of this is to scope the project. I love big, lofty projects, but are you going to have a student team work on it for 6 years straight? You might. Some organizations do long-term projects and they have a transition plan and it works. But if you're not set up that way, you might need something that can only be done in a 1-year period. or a 4-month period. So it's important that when you think about the scope of these problems, how are the students going to take those technology skills they're learning in a classroom and apply it to a problem that makes sense for both the organization and their outcomes and skills the students currently have. EPICS and IEEE funds a lot of these projects, and we do provide mentorship and we provide support. So it's not just about the money, but a lot of people come to us because of the money. So let me emphasize what our projects typically look like. They typically span between $1,000 and $10,000. That's a good amount of money for some of these projects to be implemented. Most of our projects are in the time span of 1 year. And if you're thinking about doing a larger project, we see that our committee members prefer to fund just the first part. What can you accomplish in a year, phase 1, and come back to us for that phase 2 funding. So don't be afraid to think on a grand scale, but have it scoped at that 1 year level. The projects must have students involved. They can be secondary students, they can be post-secondary, they can be primary, but there have to be students. K through 12, undergrad or grad students are allowed to be a part of this for it to count. It cannot be purely IEEE young professionals doing a project in their community. The students have to be involved in a meaningful way. We do require an established partnership with a community partner or NGO. We've had a lot of questions about, well, what about a government agency that's still helping people? And we're trying to figure out if we can adjust our flexibility for that and see what rules there are, because sometimes the funding and politics get in the way. But right now, we are based on community-based organizations as our partners. We want the projects to emphasize the engineering design process. There's a lot of really neat solutions out there that just need money to be implemented. And I respect those, but unfortunately, that's not within the scope of what we do, is fund just the deployment, just the I'm gonna buy water filters and give them to a community in need off the shelf. So the students need to be involved in the design process to create a modification or to take that solution and find a way to better it for that specific community. And we unfortunately only fund the project supplies. While I would love to travel internationally to deploy some of the projects, we don't fund international travel. We do not fund student fees or faculty benefits and fringe. So it's important to know that this is for the supplies. It is not everything. I know that makes it somewhat limiting, especially for those of you in academic settings, but we can talk and have conversations about how this might work with your institution and the rules regarding funding. What does a typical project proposal include? What is the problem and why does it matter? You have to make us realize that that problem matters to your community and that it can't just be solved by something off the shelf. Help me understand why an off-the-shelf solution doesn't work. Who are you partnering with? How do I know you're not just trying to be that engineering savior that changes the world, that you've listened to members from the stakeholders, that you have the opportunity to go through with this? You're going to have some planning details that you'll document, including a budget and timeline, and then an impact and assessment plan. From a student perspective, if you're here as a student, why should you apply? Or if you work with students, what do they get out of it? They're getting real world experiences. It's an amazing resume builder. And we hear a lot of students say, this got me that internship, or this got me the job. So think about that from that perspective. And of course, making the world a better place isn't bad either. Our strong proposals are those with a very clear problem. It needs to have the right scope. There needs to be that partner organization. Again, why doesn't something off the shelf work? And is the timeline and the budget that you've given realistic? Some of the reasons that we can't fund everything, because we do have to deny some of our applicants, are that we really didn't understand the problem. We think it's already been solved. It wasn't clear to us why it still exists. The partnership seemed superficial. It really just seemed like they said, hey, yeah, sure, bring some money in, but they've never actually met in person. Sometimes the scope of work is just too large and too unrealistic, and we're not sure that there's enough detailed design to know that you've already started the process. So it's not perfect. We won't be able to fund everyone. We do have a limited budget, but we do believe we can make the world a better place through some of these projects. From a budget perspective, I emphasize a couple things that we don't fund already, but I will also emphasize that we don't fund personal items like laptops or cell phones, and we don't fund capital expenses or research equipment. We also think it's really important that you think about the story this project is going to tell. How does this make the world a better place? Well, if you're able to determine what the impact is going to be with an assessment plan, it makes a stronger story. So are you doing pre and post surveys? Are you interviewing? Are you determining usage or tracking usage once it's in the community? It's great to just give it to them, but it's really important that we have a plan for utilization and understanding if it breaks, what's going to happen to it. So what does our timeline look like? Ultimately, once a proposal is in our system, and we sort of guess that most people take between 1 month and 2 months to write a proposal, that we'll get back to you in about 60 days. And our committee is made up of IEEE members and volunteers. So we only meet once a month. So it's not an instant feedback process. If you're selected for funding, it can take up to 2 months to distribute, depending on where you are in the globe. The team will typically be working for up to a year, and we'll have quarterly check-ins and support. And that project will be completed with a final report at the end of your proposed timeline. And if things get delayed, it's okay, we understand. But again, this is typically all in about a 1.5 year commitment. I do want to emphasize that we will be out at the table. So if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to ask. Please come talk to us about if your idea fits. But we do have a special call for proposals right now for access and abilities. We have a pocket of donor funds who really believed in access and abilities, and the fact that your technology skills and innovation can make this area better and decrease disparities. So if you're interested in this, that call for proposals has an initial deadline of November 1st. However, if you're not interested in submitting proposals, why was it worth your time to sit here today? Well, you can serve as a mentor for projects. You don't need to be involved in the proposal process, and you can take your technical skills and mentor teams. So if you're a young professional, a life member, someone in industry, we would love to pair you with a group in our community. Now, we only have so many projects. You may not get paired right away. So if that isn't going to work, you can just be a friend, and you can follow us on any of our social media channels to understand the types of projects we're doing and share the stories and impact. We also have the opportunity for you to just connect and explore and share this information back with those in your community. So you can call us for a workshop in your local section, or maybe your region, or if you're here representing a company and you might be interested in partnering with us, we would love to have a conversation to see, can we do more together? If you have any questions, we have time to take a few of them now. If there's anything that is short and specific and maybe talks too detailed about your ideas, please don't hesitate to come join us at the table. We will be available all afternoon. I'll be speaking again very briefly at dinner, and we will have the opportunity to be together tomorrow until 11:30 a.m. in the exhibit hall. We're like that front table right when you walk in, and we've got some good swag, so you can't miss us. But with that, I will take any questions from the audience. Thank you so much for listening. Are there any audience questions? We're going to give you the mic just so that those online can hear, because we're running off of my laptop audio.
I wonder what is the relationship with EPICS have to do, number one, and number two, can a project be proposed that includes cost of supplies and materials purchased abroad, so they have to be, that should be more affordable and support the local economies where the project will be.
Yes, so I'll speak loudly, and again, I hope my voice will carry, and to those on the computer, it might be a little loud, I'm sorry. So Purdue is the organization, Purdue University started EPICS, Engineering Projects in Community Service. We've had an MOU with them for multiple years to be able to use their name and share and expand their mission. Purdue EPICS does not fund projects outside of their own institution. So we work in collaboration with them to expand service learning across the globe. And we are able to fund projects through both universities running formal EPICS and individual groups that may not be familiar with EPICS from a curricular standpoint. So that's question number one. Question number two was, can you buy supplies in the local countries? And the answer is yes. It is not something where it has to be bought in the United States. When we distribute funds, we typically distribute to the local IEEE section or OU that's operating the project. And then you are responsible for then purchasing and carrying out the supplies. There is a budget report at the end. The important thing here is that it just needs to be meaningful, and it shouldn't just be, I'm spending it there for reason X. As long as there is a valid reason to buy the supplies in country and not deal with shipping them there, that is okay. We do encourage local projects. So to our teams in Uganda, they might be working on a project for their local community in Uganda. For a team in Vietnam, they might be working on a project in their local community. And in the United States, many work locally, but we do not limit it to that. So the idea of working on a global project where your community of impact is not your immediate community is permitted, but we just need to make sure that there is a strong relationship with that community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. When I was working at the Belding Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I organized a small volunteer program that was supported by the Cambridge school system, in which engineers from our organization would go into a local school near the Belding Center and take over the 7th and 8th grades once a week for an 8-week period and holistic course program. But there was no restriction on what the volunteers could teach. One for origami, others for other more technical things. But it engaged the students and exposed them to what people could do in real life. Well, are there similar things going on, or thinking of doing something like that for DC or I would like to thank the all of that kind of activity?
There are things going on. We only have a small number of education and outreach projects that are active that have been funded through EPICS and IEEE right now, but we can connect you to the Educational Activities Board. So their pre-university unit has a lot going on, and I'll emphasize we have the Teaching Excellence Hub as a resource. They have a mini grant application process to fund initiatives like that. They have a mentor platform. So there's a lot available through IEEE. And if we aren't doing it, we can try to connect you to another organizational unit that is also doing similar things. You're welcome. Yes. Oh. Yeah.
Some
Again, close.
some of the examples we're showing were like working with students or doing a project maybe someplace else before you are. Generally, how do they make those connections with say between one group and another country, for example?
I'll repeat the question for the online audience. The question here was, how does a local team in your local community connect with a global organization so that you can have a project in another country or in another region? And this is very challenging. A lot of times they come from personal connections that a faculty member or someone in industry may have. Potentially someone has a family member and they're aware. And I will say international projects take a lot of legwork and development. So I've been a service learning practitioner for multiple years. We have taken students to Vietnam, but the relationship to get the university partner and the community partner in Vietnam took us 5 years. And we've been working with them for 3 years on top of that. So these are much more long-term relationships that an organization like IEEE can solve. One of the opportunities we've seen is to partner with another university or another IEEE section to facilitate the connection. So if you really think it's important that students have a global experience, you can essentially have a study abroad exchange without the visit program, where you serve as a local connection to an organization in your area for a university abroad, and they provide you a connection in their local community. So that's one way to sort of facilitate a swap while also making sure you still connect globally.
Thank you. And so last question is, do you fund projects in computer science? And so can you give an example or two of what those are?
So the question here was, do we fund computer science projects? And the answer is yes, we take engineering, even though it's in our name, very broadly and really emphasize more technology and the appropriate technology. It doesn't always have to be a high-tech solution. Sometimes activated carbon and gravel works just fine. So it really depends. From the computer science perspective, off the top of my head, we have a few teams doing off-the-shelf electronics, but they're programming the IoT side of it. So I know the IoT is like half ECE, half CS, but we have quite a few projects that are using Raspberry Pis, Arduino, other microcontrollers to create a knowledge network. One example is our partner at NC State. They are creating a sunny day flood system. So that area is prone to just flooding, even without active awareness and weather. So they're creating sensors that will go out, that will go to a cloud-based network to look for, does the sensor get wet? How do you send those alerts out? So that's one example. There's still a hardware component, but the emphasis is mostly on the computing side and the analysis. Thank you very much.
Terrific, super inspiring. Many of you get involved with this project. Is that you with a certificate? And then thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll have our panelists.
Oh, you're going to need to be on Zoom on your device. I'm on my personal computer.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you.